Vex Thornscale had always prided himself on being a reasonable saurian. 7 feet tall, covered in emerald scales that shimmered under the artificial lighting of Harmony 7 Station, he possessed the kind of natural intimidation factor that made most species think twice about causing trouble. Which is why the Galactic Education Council had assigned him to manage the kindergarten wing of their prestigious interspecies exchange program. How hard could it be, they'd said, just keep the little ones from eating each other until pickup time. Oh, if only it were that simple. The morning had started peacefully enough. His classroom buzzed with the usual chaos of 23 younglings from 17 different species. There was Pip, a furry fluffian who communicated entirely through color-changing fur patterns. The 3 gelatinous twins from Blob Prime were practicing their shape-shifting in the corner, occasionally merging into one super blob before their teacher separated them with a stern look. Even little Zorax, whose species literally breathed fire, was behaving himself by only singeing the edges of his coloring papers. Then the newest exchange student had arrived. Tommy Rodriguez, age 6, species, human, home planet, that terrifying blue marble everyone whispered about in the faculty lounge. Vex had read the files, of course. Humans were classified as a developing species with moderate technological capabilities and generally peaceful intentions. The reports made them sound almost boring. Apparently, whoever wrote those reports had never met a human child. Tommy had been in class for exactly 7 minutes when he'd asked his first question. "Mr. Vex, why do you have so many teeth? Are you going to eat somebody?" Before Vex could formulate a diplomatic response, Tommy had moved on to examining the emergency plasma cutter mounted on the wall. "Oh, cool, is this like a lightsaber? Can I hold it? What happens if I press this button?" "Please don't touch the emergency equipment, Tommy," Vex had said, his voice taking on the patient tone he'd perfected over years of dealing with curious younglings. "But what if there's an emergency right now?" Tommy had countered with the kind of logic that made adult brains hurt. "Shouldn't I know how to use it? What if space pirates attack? My mom says space pirates are mostly just misunderstood, but she also taught me 17 different ways to disable someone with a paperclip." Vex had paused, his translator implant working overtime to make sure he'd heard correctly. 17 ways. With a paperclip. And the mother considered pirates misunderstood. The morning had continued in this vein. Tommy had somehow convinced the crystalline student to demonstrate how their species created small earthquakes by singing. He'd taught the aquatic younglings a human game called Marco Polo that had resulted in 3 flooded classrooms, and when snack time came around, he'd politely declined the standard nutrition paste in favor of something he'd brought from home. "My mom packed me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich," Tommy had announced cheerfully, unwrapping what looked like a perfectly normal food item. The reaction had been immediate. Every alien child in the room had backed away as if Tommy were holding a plasma grenade. Is that from an earth plant?" Pip had whispered, her fur cycling through nervous orange patterns. 2 earth plants, actually, Tommy had corrected helpfully, plus some grape stuff. "Want a bite?" The collective no from 22 alien voices had been so loud it had triggered the station's noise complaint system. Vex was beginning to understand why humans had developed such a reputation across the galaxy. It wasn't that they were inherently dangerous, exactly. It was that they approached everything with a combination of fearless curiosity and casual confidence that made other species deeply, fundamentally nervous. Case in point, Tommy was currently trying to befriend Morg, a young brutanoid whose species was genetically programmed for aggression. Morg had been sulking in the corner all morning, occasionally growling at anyone who came too close. "Hey Morg," Tommy was saying, completely ignoring the fact that Morg had 6-inch claws and had been glaring death at everyone. "You seem sad. Do you want to talk about your feelings? My mom says talking about feelings is important for emotional development." Morg, who had never encountered the concept of feelings before, looked deeply confused. Vex checked his chronometer. Still 3 hours until pickup time. He was beginning to think he deserved hazard pay. That's when the door exploded. Not metaphorically exploded, actually exploded, in a shower of sparks and twisted metal that sent every youngster diving for cover behind their tiny desks. Every youngster except Tommy, who stood up to get a better view. "Oh, wow," he said, with the kind of delighted enthusiasm most children reserve for ice cream trucks. "Is this a field trip?" Through the smoking hole that used to be a door stepped Krell Bloodfang, notorious captain of the pirate vessel Void Reaper, 8 feet of scarred, muscular Vordak warrior, covered in battle armor that had seen more conflicts than a diplomatic treaty. His 4 arms each held a different weapon, and his mandibles clicked with predatory satisfaction as he surveyed the room. Vex's scales immediately shifted to their panic coloration, a lovely shade of, oh dear, we're all going to die yellow. Nobody move, Krell bellowed, his voice echoing through the classroom like thunder in a cave. This is a hostage situation. I am Krell Bloodfang of the Void Reapers, and I'm here to take prisoners for ransom. The alien children did exactly what any sensible species would do when faced with a heavily armed space pirate. They whimpered, hid, and tried to make themselves as small as possible. Some of the smaller ones started crying, in frequencies that made the windows vibrate. Tommy raised his hand. Yes, Krell said automatically, his brain apparently short-circuiting at the unexpected politeness. Are you having a bad day? Tommy asked with genuine concern. Because you seem really angry about something. My mom says that when people are mean to others, it's usually because they're hurting inside. Krell's mandibles stopped clicking. He stared down at the small human with something approaching confusion. What? No, I'm not having a bad day. I'm conducting a raid. Oh, Tommy nodded sagely. Is that like when grown-ups have jobs they don't really like, but they have to do them anyway to pay for food and stuff? It's not, Krell's grip on his plasma rifle wavered slightly. Look, small creature, I'm here to take hostages. Valuable ones. These pathetic alien spawn are worthless, but you... His compound eyes focused on Tommy with renewed interest. You're human. Your species has quite the reputation. You'll fetch a good price. That's not very nice, Tommy said matter-of-factly. You shouldn't call my friends pathetic. That hurts their feelings. And kidnapping is against the law. Didn't your parents teach you about making good choices? Krell looked around the room as if hoping someone else would explain what was happening. The other children were still cowering, but they were now watching this exchange with the kind of fascination usually reserved for nature documentaries about apex predators. My parents were killed in tribal warfare when I was a hatchling, Krell found himself saying, then immediately looked confused about why he'd shared that information. Oh no, that's terrible. Tommy's eyes widened with sympathy. That must have made you really sad. Is that why you became a pirate? Because you didn't have anyone to teach you better ways to solve problems? Vex watched in horrified fascination as the most feared pirate in 3 sectors began to look genuinely uncomfortable. This was not how hostage situations were supposed to go. He'd seen the training videos. I don't need anyone to teach me anything, Krell muttered, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. I'm a feared warrior. Planets tremble at the mention of my name. But are you happy? Tommy asked, tilting his head with the kind of innocent curiosity that could apparently disarm interstellar criminals. Because you don't seem happy. You seem like you're pretending to be scary, because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Krell opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. Then opened it again. No sound came out. Tell you what, Tommy continued helpfully. Why don't you come sit down and we can talk about your feelings? We were just having circle time before you got here. Do you want to share with the group? I don't want to share with the group, Krell exploded, but even to his own ears it sounded more like a frustrated teenager than a terrifying space pirate. I want to take you hostage and demand ransom from your family. Okay, Tommy said agreeably. We can do that if it makes you feel better. But can we have snack time first? I have a peanut butter sandwich and I'm supposed to eat lunch at regular times or my blood sugar gets weird. Vex realized he was witnessing something that would either go down in galactic history as the most successful hostage negotiation ever, or the most bizarre therapy session in the known universe. Possibly both. Krell looked at his weapons, looked at Tommy, looked at the cowering alien children, and then looked back at Tommy, who was now digging through his lunchbox with complete unconcern for the fact that he was supposedly being kidnapped. This isn't how this is supposed to work, Krell said weakly. While Tommy was busy psychoanalyzing his would-be kidnapper, the news of the hostage situation was spreading across the galactic communication networks at faster-than-light speed, and with each relay the panic level increased exponentially. On the bridge of the Centaurian diplomatic vessel Peaceful Resolution, Captain Zara Nightwhisper nearly choked on her morning stimulant when the alert came through. A human child has been taken hostage, she sputtered, her normally composed demeanor cracking like cheap hull plating. Which human child? Please tell me it's not one of the exchange students. It appears to be Tommy Rodriguez, age 6, currently enrolled in the Harmony 7 kindergarten program, her communications officer reported, with the tone of someone delivering a death sentence. Captain Nightwhisper went very still. Get me a direct line to Galactic Command, code Black, and somebody find me the nearest escape pod. 3 systems over, Admiral Krex of the Vorthan Defense Fleet was having a similar reaction. Human. Child. Hostage. He punctuated each word by slamming his fist on the tactical display. "Do you people have any idea what this means?" His bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. They'd all heard the stories. "Sir," his tactical officer ventured carefully, "surely it's just one small human. How dangerous could it be?" Admiral Krex fixed him with the kind of stare usually reserved for officers who suggested attacking black holes. "Let me tell you about humans, Lieutenant. 2 years ago, the Terran diplomatic vessel Sweet Caroline was supposed to conduct a routine cultural exchange with the Melonian Empire. Routine. A simple meet and greet with some peaceful agricultural worlds." The bridge crew leaned in despite themselves. 3 weeks later, the Melonians had accidentally elected the human ambassador as their new planetary emperor. Their entire agricultural system had been revolutionized with something called crop rotation, and they'd somehow defeated a pirate invasion using weaponized farming equipment. The humans insisted they were just trying to be helpful. "But sir, that was adults," the tactical officer protested. "This is just a child." "Just a child?" Admiral Kreck's voice rose to a pitch that made several bridge instruments recalibrate themselves. "Do you know what happened when little Emma Watson got lost during a family vacation to the Rigel system? A 6-year-old human girl, separated from her parents for exactly 4 hours. "What happened, sir?" "He accidentally founded a successful mining operation, taught the local population 17 new languages, and somehow negotiated a peace treaty between 2 warring factions by getting them to play something called Duck Duck Goose. Her parents found her hosting an interplanetary trade summit in what used to be an abandoned space station." The bridge fell silent except for the nervous humming of life support systems. "And now," Admiral Krex continued ominously, "some fool has taken a human child hostage. Do you know what happens when you threaten a human's offspring?" Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place. The Galactic News Network had interrupted regular programming to provide continuous coverage of what they were calling the Harmony 7 incident. Their expert panel consisted of various aliens who had encountered humans before, and none of them looked particularly optimistic. "The thing about humans," explained Dr. Vanna Shellcrack, a renowned xenopsychologist, "is that they have this peculiar combination of protective instincts and creative problem-solving that defies all evolutionary logic. Most species respond to threats with either fight or flight. Humans respond with, 'Hold my beverage and watch this.'" The news anchor, a dignified crystalline being whose natural transparency was currently flickering with nervous energy, pressed for more details. "But surely, Dr. Shellcrack, the galactic authorities can handle one upset human parent." Dr. Shellcrack's expression suggested she'd rather explain quantum mechanics to a particularly dense rock. 6 months ago, a human parent named Rebecca Park discovered that her teenage son had been overcharged at a Vorthon trading post. Overcharged by 3 credits. 3! By the time she was finished, she'd accidentally restructured the entire Vorthon economic system, introduced something called consumer protection laws, and the trading post owner had adopted her son and was paying for his college education. "It seems extreme." "This was just about money," Dr. Shellcrack continued grimly. "This is about someone taking her child. The human maternal protective response is legendary. There are species who have developed entire military strategies based on the simple principle of never, ever, under any circumstances, mess with a human's young." Back on Harmony 7, station security was having their own crisis meeting. Chief Security Officer Bramble, a 6-armed hexapod with 30 years of experience handling everything from diplomatic incidents to full-scale invasions, was reviewing the personnel files of one Maria Rodriguez with the expression of someone reading his own obituary. "Maintenance engineer," he muttered, scrolling through her work history. "Specializes in heavy machinery repair, emergency systems, and, oh, wonderful, creative problem-solving under pressure. And look at this performance review. Maria consistently finds innovative solutions to impossible problems. Last week, she fixed a critical life support failure using nothing but spare parts from a beverage dispenser and what she described as basic common sense. We have no idea how any of it works, but it's been running perfectly ever since." His deputy, a nervous fluffian whose fur was cycling through panic colors faster than a disco ball, wrung his hands. "Sir, what are we going to do when she gets here?" Chief Bramble looked up from the file with the weary expression of someone who'd suddenly realized he was probably going to need to update his resume. Maria Rodriguez was 43 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and currently 3 cups of coffee into what had started as a perfectly normal Tuesday morning. She'd been elbow deep in the guts of Atmospheric Processing Unit 7, trying to figure out why it kept making a noise that sounded like a dying Vorthak whale, when her personal communicator had chimed. The message was simple. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Principal Mindweaver at Harmony 7 Educational Center. There's been an incident involving Tommy. Please call back at your earliest convenience. Maria had paused, wrench still in hand, and felt that familiar maternal sixth sense kick in. The same sense that had told her Tommy was about to put his finger in the electrical socket when he was 2, or that he was planning to help with dinner by reorganizing the spice cabinet when he was 4. Her return call had been answered on the first ring. Mrs. Rodriguez, thank you for calling back so quickly. Principal Mindweaver's voice had carried that particular tone that educational administrators used when they were trying very hard not to panic. I want to assure you that Tommy is perfectly safe, but there's been a small situation. Define small situation. Well, it appears that a space pirate has taken him hostage. Maria had set down her wrench with the kind of deliberate care that made her coworkers nervous. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? A space pirate. Krell Bloodfang of the Void Reapers. He's currently holding Tommy aboard his ship, which is docked at our station. But please don't worry, Tommy seems to be handling the situation remarkably well. In fact, last report suggested they were having what appeared to be a rather in-depth conversation about career choices and emotional processing. Maria had closed her eyes and counted to 10, then to 20. Then she'd decided that 30 was probably a good stopping point before she said something that would end up in an incident report. I see, she'd said, in the kind of calm, measured tone that had once made a Centaurian warlord voluntarily return a borrowed tool before she'd even finished asking for it. And what exactly are your security forces doing about this situation? Well, they're monitoring the situation very closely, from a safe distance. From a safe distance. Yes. Apparently, standard hostage negotiation protocols become somewhat complicated when the hostage appears to be providing therapy to the hostage taker. Our tactical team isn't quite sure how to proceed. Maria had opened her eyes and looked around her workshop. 30 years of fixing impossible problems had taught her that most situations had solutions. You just had to be creative about finding them. The wall-mount tool rack held her standard kit: plasma torches, molecular adhesive dispensers, emergency hull sealers, portable gravity generators, and about 50 other devices that had been designed for maintenance work but could easily be repurposed for more pressing needs. I'll be right there, she'd said. Mrs. Rodriguez, I really think you should let our professionals handle this. Space pirates can be very dangerous, and we have trained negotiators who— Principal Mindweaver, Maria had interrupted, her voice taking on the kind of patient tone usually reserved for explaining basic physics to particularly dense asteroids. Someone has taken my son, my 6-year-old son, who's probably asking his kidnapper about his childhood trauma and trying to fix his emotional problems with the power of friendship and snack foods. Do you honestly think I'm going to sit here and let professionals handle this? The silence on the other end of the line had been telling. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Maria had continued, already reaching for her toolkit. Please have station security clear me a direct path to the docking bay. And someone might want to suggest to this Krell person that he release Tommy and apologize before I get there. It'll save everyone a lot of paperwork. The toolkit that Maria Rodriguez carried to work every day weighed 47 pounds and contained enough specialized equipment to rebuild a small starship from scratch. By the time she'd finished upgrading it for the current situation, it weighed considerably more and hummed with the kind of energy that made nearby electronics nervous. The plasma torch now had a range of 50 meters and could cut through military-grade armor plating. The molecular adhesive dispenser had been recalibrated to work as a highly effective restraint system. And the portable gravity generator, which was normally used for moving heavy equipment, could now create localized gravitational fields strong enough to pin a Vorthok warrior to the deck like a bug under glass. She'd also stopped by the station's supply depot and picked up a few additional items, just in case. The shuttle ride to Harmony 7 had given Maria time to think, which was probably unfortunate for everyone involved. By the time she'd docked at the station, her initial maternal concern had evolved into something that resembled a tactical assessment mixed with barely controlled maternal fury. And station security had indeed cleared her a path, though cleared might have been an understatement. The corridors were completely empty except for the occasional maintenance drone, and even those seemed to be hurrying about their business faster than usual. Chief Security Officer Bramble had met her at the airlock, flanked by 2 of his best officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. Mrs. Rodriguez, he'd begun nervously, I want to assure you that we have the situation well in hand. Our tactical team is prepared to move as soon as we receive word that it's safe to do so. Maria had looked at him with the kind of expression that suggested she was calculating how much trouble she'd get in for stunning a security chief with a plasma torch set to minimum power. "Where is my son?" she'd asked. "Docking Bay 7. But please, Mrs. Rodriguez, let us handle this. Krell Bloodfang has a reputation for violence, and we don't want to escalate the situation unnecessarily." Maria had adjusted the strap of her toolkit and started walking toward Docking Bay 7 with the kind of purposeful stride that had once caused an entire Regellian construction crew to finish a 6-month project in 3 weeks. "Mrs. Rodriguez, please," Bramble had called after her. "At least let us provide backup." She'd paused and looked back at him. "Chief Bramble, I appreciate the offer, but I've got this. Someone took my little boy, and that person is about to learn why the galaxy has developed such interesting opinions about humans. You might want to have your medical team standing by, though. Not for me." The security team had exchanged glances and silently agreed that their best course of action was to follow at a safe distance and try to minimize collateral damage. As Maria had approached Docking Bay 7, her personal communicator had chimed with an incoming message. She'd glanced at it and seen a text from Tommy. "Hi, Mom. I made a new friend, but he's really sad about his job. Can we invite him for dinner? Also, he has a really cool spaceship, but it smells weird." Maria had smiled for the first time since receiving the initial call. Her son was fine, which meant she could focus on the more pressing matter of explaining proper child-rearing etiquette to a space pirate. The airlock to the Void Reaper hissed open with all the dramatic flair of a poorly maintained atmospheric seal, which Maria's professional eye immediately identified as a sign of deferred maintenance. She made a mental note to mention it to the ship's owner, assuming he was still in any condition to receive constructive criticism by the time she was done with him. The ship's interior was exactly what she'd expected from a vessel called the Void Reaper. Dark, intimidating, and decorated with enough skulls and weapon racks to supply a small war. It also smelled like Krell hadn't discovered the concept of air fresheners, which explained Tommy's text message. Maria followed the sound of voices toward what appeared to be the ship's common area, her toolkit humming softly with barely contained energy. The conversation she was overhearing grew more distinct as she approached. "So you see, Krell," Tommy's voice was saying with the patient tone of someone explaining multiplication tables. "When you take people's things without asking, it makes them sad. And when you point scary weapons at children, it makes their parents upset. It's basic, cause and effect." "But I'm a pirate," came Krell's voice, though it sounded considerably less confident than it had during his dramatic entrance to the classroom. "Taking things and pointing weapons is what pirates do. It's my job description." "That's just because nobody ever taught you better job skills," Tommy replied helpfully. "My mom says that most problems come from people not having the right tools for the situation. Like, you're probably really good at flying spaceships and navigating and stuff, right? Those are valuable skills. You could totally get a job with a shipping company." What? No, I'm feared across 3 sectors. "But are you happy being feared? Because you seem really lonely, and loneliness makes people make bad choices sometimes." Maria paused at the entrance to the common area and took in the scene. Her 6-year-old son was sitting cross-legged on what appeared to be a weapons storage crate, sharing his peanut butter sandwich with an 8-foot-tall space pirate who was having what could only be described as an existential crisis. Krell's various weapons were scattered around the room as if he'd forgotten he was holding them, and he was sitting on the floor at Tommy's eye level like a kindergartner during story time. "Hello," Maria said pleasantly, stepping into the room with the kind of casual confidence usually reserved for people entering their own living rooms. "You must be Krell. I'm Maria Rodriguez, Tommy's mother." Krell's 4 compound eyes swiveled toward her with the speed of a startled prey animal. His mandibles began clicking rapidly in what she recognized as a fear response, though she wasn't sure how she knew that. Probably the same maternal instinct that let her know when Tommy was about to do something creative with the kitchen appliances. You're the parent," Krell stammered, scrambling to his feet and reaching for the nearest weapon. His hands were shaking. "I am indeed," Maria confirmed, setting her toolkit down with deliberate care. "And you're the person who took my son without permission." "It was a kidnapping, a proper hostage situation. I had demands." "Did you now?" Maria's tone remained conversational, but Tommy recognized the subtle shift that meant someone was about to receive what he privately thought of as the mom talk. He'd seen her use it on door-to-door salespeople and overly aggressive store managers. It was terrifyingly effective. "What were your demands exactly?" she continued. Krell's mandibles clicked faster. "Ransom, money, credits for the safe return of your spawn." "I see. And did you file the proper paperwork for this transaction?" Paperwork? Well, surely you have some kind of business license for kidnapping operations, insurance forms, a receipt system. You can't just take people's children without proper documentation. That's not how commerce works. Tommy watched this exchange with the fascination of someone seeing a master craftsperson at work. His mom was using her solving impossible problems voice, which usually meant that whatever problem she was facing was about to become significantly less impossible. Pirates don't need paperwork, Krell said weakly. Oh, but they do, Maria replied, pulling a small tablet from her toolkit. According to Galactic Commerce Regulation 47B, any transaction involving the temporary custody of sentient beings requires a minimum of 12 different permits, a surety bond, and proof of adequate insurance coverage. Do you have proof of adequate insurance coverage, Krell? I don't understand what's happening, Krell muttered, looking around his own ship as if he'd never seen it before. What's happening, Maria explained patiently, is that you've attempted to conduct an unlicensed business transaction involving my son. Now, I could report this to the proper authorities and let them sort out the paperwork violations, which would probably result in significant fines and possible imprisonment. She paused to let this sink in. Or we could handle this as a civil matter between reasonable adults. You want to handle this civilly? Krell's voice cracked slightly on the last word. Of course, you made an honest mistake. Tommy tells me you've been having some career satisfaction issues, and I can certainly understand that. Being a pirate must be very stressful work. Irregular hours, constant legal troubles, probably terrible health benefits. We don't get health benefits, Krell admitted. See, that's exactly what I mean. You're clearly an intelligent person with valuable skills, but you're trapped in a career path that doesn't offer opportunities for growth or personal fulfillment. Maria sat down on another crate, bringing herself to Krell's eye level with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years negotiating with a strong-willed 6-year-old. Now, Tommy mentioned that you're an excellent pilot. Is that accurate? Yes. I've been flying ships since I was barely out of my egg. Wonderful. And I imagine you're familiar with interstellar navigation, cargo handling, maybe some basic mechanical repair? Well, yes, but those are exactly the skills that legitimate shipping companies are looking for. The galaxy always needs qualified pilots, especially ones with experience in the more dangerous sectors. You could probably make twice what you're earning now as a pirate. Plus, you'd get regular pay, health benefits, and retirement planning. Krell stared at her as if she'd just suggested he take up interpretive dance. But I'm a pirate. It's who I am. No, Maria said gently. It's what you do. Who you are is someone who's been taking care of himself since he was a child, who's learned complex technical skills, and who's managed to survive in one of the most dangerous professions in the galaxy. Those are impressive accomplishments, Krell. You should be proud of them. Tommy nodded enthusiastically. See, I told you my mom was really smart about this stuff. But what about my reputation? Krell asked plaintively. Everyone knows Krell Bloodfang. I'm feared across 3 sectors. And that kind of name recognition could be very valuable in the right context, Maria pointed out. Imagine the marketing potential. Bloodfang Express. We deliver your cargo safely. Or, we'll hunt down whoever tried to steal it. You could build an entire brand around your reputation for being formidable. Clients would know that their shipments were protected by someone with a proven track record of getting results. Krell's eyes widened as he considered this possibility. That actually sounds kind of appealing. Of course it does. You'd be using your existing skills in a more constructive way, making an honest living, and probably sleeping better at night knowing that you're helping people instead of terrorizing them. I do have trouble sleeping, Krell admitted. Guilty conscience, you know. Occupational hazard. Exactly. Now, here's what I propose. Maria pulled out a small business card from her toolkit. This is the contact information for Galactic Freight Solutions. They're always looking for experienced pilots, especially for runs through the more dangerous sectors where your reputation would actually be an asset. I want you to call them tomorrow and set up an interview. You want me to get a job interview? I want you to get a fresh start. Everyone deserves the opportunity to make better choices, Krell. Even people who've made some questionable decisions in the past. Krell looked at the business card as if it were made of solid platinum. And what about this? The kidnapping thing. Well, Maria said thoughtfully, Tommy seems to have enjoyed meeting you, despite the unconventional circumstances. And you've been very polite during our conversation. I think we can chalk this up to a learning experience for everyone involved. You're not going to have me arrested? Not if you promise me 2 things. First, no more kidnapping. children or anyone else. It's not good business, and it's definitely not good for your emotional well-being. And the second thing? Maria's expression became slightly more serious, though her tone remained pleasant. If you ever, and I mean ever, point a weapon at my son again, or anyone else's child for that matter, I will personally track you down and use my plasma torch to write a very detailed complaint about your customer service skills directly onto your ship's hull, in letters large enough to be seen from orbit. Are we clear on that point? Krell glanced at Maria's toolkit, which was still humming softly with barely contained energy, and nodded vigorously. Crystal clear, absolutely. No more weapons pointed at children, ever. Wonderful. Tommy, are you ready to go home? Can Krell come to dinner sometime? Tommy asked hopefully. I think he'd really like your spaghetti and meatballs, and maybe we could help him practice for job interviews. Maria looked at Krell, who was staring at both of them as if they'd just offered to adopt him. I think that could be arranged, she said, assuming Krell follows through on getting that job interview. I will, Krell said quickly. I absolutely will, thank you, both of you. I don't understand how this happened, but thank you. That's what humans do, Krell, Tommy said matter-of-factly, climbing down from his crate. We help people figure out how to be better. It's kind of our thing. 3 months later, the galaxy was still trying to process what had become known as the Harmony 7 incident, though most official reports had been classified under inexplicable human behavior, and filed away in the same archives that contained documentation of 17 other impossible things humans had accomplished while just trying to help. Krell Bloodfang, formerly the most feared pirate in 3 sectors, was currently the most successful independent freight captain in 5 sectors. Bloodfang Express had become the shipping company of choice for anyone who needed cargo delivered through dangerous territory, largely because Krell's reputation meant that other pirates took one look at his ship transponder and decided they had urgent business elsewhere. His employee satisfaction ratings were off the charts, mostly because he treated his crew with the kind of genuine care and respect that he'd learned from a 6-year-old human during what was supposed to have been a kidnapping. His ships ran on time, his rates were fair, and his customer service had become legendary throughout the commercial shipping industry. It's the strangest thing, he'd told the Galactic Business Journal during their profile interview. I'm making twice as much money as I ever did as a pirate, I sleep well at night, and people are actually happy to see me coming. Turns out that helping people is much more satisfying than terrorizing them. Who knew? The article had been required reading at the Galactic Military Academy, filed under Advanced Hostage Psychology, and subtitled, Why Traditional Negotiation Tactics Don't Work on Humans. Back on Harmony 7, Vex Thornscale had received a commendation for his handling of the crisis, though he privately felt this was somewhat unfair since his main contribution had been standing in the corner trying not to panic while a human child conducted impromptu therapy on an armed criminal. The commendation currently hung on his office wall, next to a photo of Tommy teaching Krell's crew how to play Duck Duck Goose during one of their regular dinner visits. The Galactic Education Council had made some policy adjustments following the incident. The standard emergency response manual now included a new chapter titled Protocols for Situations Involving Human Children, which consisted mainly of variations on step back and let them handle it themselves. They probably know what they're doing. They'd also added a liability waiver to the enrollment forms for the kindergarten exchange program. The waiver was 12 pages long and had been translated into 47 different languages, but the essential message was simple. If you mess with a human child, you're on your own. Principal Mindweaver had privately admitted to colleagues that she'd never seen anything quite like the Rodriguez family's approach to conflict resolution. Most species respond to hostage situations with either negotiations or tactical intervention, she'd explained during a conference on interspecies education. Humans respond with career counseling and dinner invitations. It shouldn't work, but somehow it's more effective than anything we've tried. Tommy himself had become something of a celebrity among his classmates, though he didn't seem particularly impressed by the attention. When asked by the school newspaper about his experience being kidnapped by a space pirate, he shrugged and said, "It was okay, I guess. Krell was really sad about his job, so Mom helped him find a better one. That's what moms do." The interview had been reprinted in educational journals across the galaxy as an example of how human children process traumatic experiences. Child psychologists were still trying to figure out how a 6-year-old had managed to provide more effective therapy in 30 minutes than most professionals could achieve in months of sessions. Maria Rodriguez had been offered consulting positions with 3 different galactic peacekeeping organizations, all of whom were interested in her innovative approach to hostage negotiation. She'd politely declined all offers, explaining that she was perfectly happy with her job, fixing atmospheric processors, and didn't really have time for a career change. She had, however, started a small side business providing career transition counseling for reformed criminals. Her success rate was 100%, largely because her approach combined practical job placement assistance with the kind of maternal disappointment that could make a Vorthok warlord voluntarily enroll in anger management classes. The Galactic Department of Justice had quietly added Maria Rodriguez to their list of persons of interest, though the notation in her files simply read, "Approach, with respect. Extreme caution, unnecessary if you haven't done anything wrong. If you have done something wrong, suggest immediate voluntary confession and sincere apology." But perhaps the most significant change was in the way other species viewed humanity as a whole. The official diplomatic classification had been updated from generally peaceful with concerning tendencies to aggressively helpful with inexplicable results. This was considered a vast improvement in interspecies relations, though it came with a footnote warning that humans should be approached with careful optimism and adequate insurance coverage. The Void Reaper itself had been converted into Bloodfang Express's flagship vessel, complete with a cheerful paint job and a cargo hold that smelled significantly better than it used to. Krell had kept one small section of the ship decorated with his old pirate memorabilia, partly for nostalgia, and partly because Tommy had declared it really cool and insisted on giving tours to his classmates during field trips. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after the incident, Tommy was once again sitting in Vex Thornscale's classroom for afternoon circle time. The topic of the day was, "What I want to be when I grow up," and each student was sharing their career aspirations with the group. Pip wanted to be a color theorist, which made perfect sense for a Floofian. The Gelatinous twins wanted to open a restaurant where they could legally merge into different shapes for entertainment purposes. Zorax had decided that his fire-breathing abilities made him a natural candidate for emergency rescue work. When it was Tommy's turn, he stood up with the confident air of someone who'd already had more real-world experience than most adults. "I want to help people solve their problems," he announced. "Like my mom does. She's really good at figuring out what people need and helping them get it. And sometimes, the people who seem the scariest are actually just sad and need someone to listen to them." Vex nodded approvingly, though privately he made a mental note to include advanced conflict resolution in Tommy's individualized education plan. At the rate things were going, the child would probably need it. "That sounds like a wonderful career goal, Tommy," Vex said. "Do you have any specific ideas about how you'd like to help people?" Tommy thought about this seriously. "Well, Krell says there are lots of other pirates out there who are probably just as unhappy as he was. Maybe I could help them find better jobs too. Mom says the galaxy always needs more people who are good at solving problems." The other children nodded enthusiastically. Several of them had met Krell during his dinner visits and had been impressed by his transformation from terrifying space pirate to successful businessman who brought really good cookies. Vex felt a familiar sensation that he'd learned to recognize as his danger sense activating. It was the same feeling he'd had right before Tommy had asked about the emergency plasma cutter, or when he'd convinced the crystalline student to demonstrate earthquake generation. "That's a very ambitious goal, Tommy," he said carefully. "Perhaps we should talk to your mother about the proper educational requirements for that kind of career path." "Oh, I already did," Tommy replied cheerfully. "She said I should probably study psychology and business management and maybe some basic engineering. Practical stuff for helping people figure out their lives." Vex looked around the classroom at 22 alien children who were now listening to Tommy with the kind of rapt attention usually reserved for adventure stories. Several of them were taking notes. "And she said," Tommy continued, "that if I'm going to make a career out of helping people, I should probably start practicing now. So if anyone else here has any problems they need help with, I'm totally available." The silence that followed was broken by Morg, the young brutinoid who'd been Tommy's first rehabilitation project, raising his hand tentatively. "Tommy," Morg said in his naturally gravelly voice, "I've been thinking about what you said about feelings, and I think I might have some anger management issues that could use addressing." Vex closed his eyes and began composing his resignation letter in his head. Then he opened them again and looked at his students, all of whom were eagerly volunteering to share their emotional problems with their 6-year-old human classmate. On second thought, maybe he'd just request a transfer to a nice, quiet posting, somewhere peaceful, like a maximum security prison. Outside the classroom window, a Bloodfang Express cargo ship was departing from the station's commercial docking bay, its hull gleaming with fresh paint, and its crew humming what sounded suspiciously like a human children's song. The ship's captain, a reformed space pirate who now spent his evenings reading self-help books and his weekends volunteering at orphanages, was probably the happiest criminal-turned-legitimate businessman in galactic history. And somewhere in the station's maintenance section, Maria Rodriguez was fixing another impossible problem with a combination of engineering expertise, creative thinking, and the kind of practical optimism that had accidentally revolutionized interstellar conflict resolution. The galaxy, as usual, was a little bit better than it had been yesterday, and no one was entirely sure how that had happened. But that, as Tommy would say, was just what humans did.